Good morning and welcome to Effective Communication. My name is Morgan Baum and I am the Director of First Year Experience here at Greensboro College. So what the presentation is going to be like today is I really want all of you as student affairs professionals to be able to leave here and to effectively give a real great presentation on effective communication to all of your college students that you interact with. The fact that Greensboro College is a small private liberal arts school is really a reason why I wanted to focus on effective communication. Because it is such a small school and is very heavily involved in athletics, I know a lot of the students here are very involved on teams and are on soccer to football to all of the different sports that we offer here. And communication on a soccer team or a football team or just any athletics team is really more of an aggressive type of style. And I want all of these students here to really be able to flourish in their communication and be able to really get across with effective communication, whether they're speaking to their coach, their teammate, their professor, or just a colleague at the university. So if you did not get a handout, please make sure that you grab one before you leave. It kind of goes over everything that I talk about today and will kind of give you some pointers on how to lead this presentation effectively. So I'm going to kind of go off of this presentation in the as if I was giving it to students. So if you already know the answers, that's great. I'm sure most of you will, but this is just so you all can get the idea of how to give this presentation to your students. So the first, and I, just to let you all know, at the bottom I did put my email address, so please feel free to contact me after that if you want my PowerPoint or any other questions that you may have. I'd be happy to answer them. So the first thing we will be talking about is just kind of going over what we will be discussing. We will first talk about interpersonal communication, nonverbal communication, and then active listening, because together all of these combined make effective communication. The first we'll be talking about is interpersonal communication. A lot of times I like to ask the students if any of them can define interpersonal communication for me. A lot of times they can't, but they're kind of in the ballpark, so I define it for them. Interpersonal communication is an exchange of information between two or more people. This does not always have to be verbal. This can be in any way. That's why we talk about active listening as well as nonverbal communication, because those are just as important as verbal communication a lot of times. So the three types of interpersonal communication are aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. And so I like to always go through what these three mean. Aggressive is a lot more combative and a lot of the times a little bit more on the defensive nature. Passive-aggressive is more so talking behind someone's back and not being willing to really address that person if you do have an issue with them. And then assertive is much more the appropriate route, and that is what we're going to be talking about now. Assertiveness is the ability to be honest and express your opinions, feelings, attitudes, and rights without undue anxiety in a way that doesn't infringe on the rights of others. So it's very much about being able to effectively explain your feelings, get that point across, and then also make sure that they understand where you're coming from. And so there's no lack of communication. All points have been addressed and they can really understand where you're coming from. Some of the characteristics of assertiveness are as follows. It can be a learned behavior. It's expressed more easily towards strangers versus those who are close to you or to authority figures. Show self-respect, therefore builds respect for that person, and it is a healthy form of communication. A lot of times you can see that it is more expressed more easily towards strangers, because a lot of times you can be a little bit more upfront with a stranger rather than having those feelings of not wanting the other person to take what you say incorrectly or just worried about what that other person might think. And so it is sometimes more easily to do assertive communication with strangers rather than to someone who you really truly care about. But that's when those conversations can be so powerful and really come across great. So some of the different ways on how to be assertive. Number one is to show empathy and validation. Acknowledge the other person's feelings. Make sure that you don't just come at someone with you did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, but really let them know what they did correct. And by showing empathy, you're really putting yourself in their shoes and making sure that they understand that you know where they're coming from. Second is the statement of the problem. What exactly has brought you to say something, and clarify what's wrong. So don't just say, oh, I don't like the way you do that. Say, this is what you're doing and that doesn't work for me, and I would really appreciate it if you can adjust how that's being done. And that leads us to number 3, which is the statement of desire. And that's the statement of the desired change. So what is it that they're doing incorrectly, and how would you like to see that changed, and how it can become better? And then communicating assertively also comes into play with your body language, the voice and tone that you speak with, and the timing. You want to make sure that you and that other person has time to cool down from the situation, and make sure that the place and manner of which you speak is appropriate. So the steps to being assertive are as follows. Evaluate your rights and the rights of others. Number 2 is decide on your content. What is the real issue that you are addressing? And be sure not to bring up past incidences that might have happened, to really stay on task and on point to what is going on. Pick the right time and use appropriate nonverbal communication. Address the issues and desired problem with clarity. Express your feelings. Request a change in behavior. State the playoffs, and of what is going to work and what's not. And then also, through it all, listen and continually assess. This one's really important because you expect that other person to be listening and active listening and being assertive with you back. So they might have some things to say in return, and you want to be able to take that information, process it, marinate with it, and be able to come back with an appropriate response. Some of the other ways about receiving assertive behavior, so like I said, if that person decides to come back with you in an appropriate way, but it might be in an assertive way, your body language is very important to remember. Active listening, listen first, respond second. Understand it is hard to be assertive, and respect that other person, because you having just been assertive with them, you can understand that it does take some guts and, having to really put yourself out there. So be sure to understand where they're coming from. And then be honest about your feelings. If what they're saying is hurting your feelings, be sure to express that, because that's what all about being assertive. And then be assertive back, just like what I said. You want to be able to express your feelings and make sure they hear you and that everything goes appropriately. With nonverbal communication, what is nonverbal communication? It really is communication that is other than the spoken word. So that includes all forms of body language, eye contact, and other cues that one might give indications of what the person is really communicating. So nodding your head, being like, oh yeah, I understand. Those are nonverbal. So really making sure that they get it without verbally speaking it. Some of those positive examples of nonverbals are smiling, arms unfolded, eye contact, and then also like head nodding, being right there with them, making sure that they understand that you're still with them and you're listening. Some of the examples of negative nonverbal listening or nonverbal communication is frowning, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact, looking around, and also just not being present, kind of dazing off and looking around. You don't want to speak to anyone when they're not right here with you, so that's very important. The last point that we're going to talk about is active listening. What is active listening? It's kind of broken down into 3 parts. The first is the intent to listen for meaning, a structured way of listening and responding to others. The second focuses attention to the speaker. And the third is listening with all senses. So you're not being distracted by cell phones or water bottles or anything else that might be around, but you are fully clued into that person. The nonverbal cues for active listening are squarely facing the person, open posture, leaning forward, so just kind of not sitting back and crossing your arms, but leaning forward and really being intent with that person, nodding, eye contact is maintained, and relax while attending. And so you can kind of see a lot of overlap between active listening and nonverbal communication because they very much go hand in hand. So when combining those 3 things, you really get the perfect form for effective communication. And I think these points are really great to start with the college student age because they can take this information in, marinate it, and really be able to continue effective communication going forward. If a student is grounded in these principles before going off to the job search or once they are hired and are working professionally, this is really going to help them succeed and kind of be a step ahead of everyone else. else. So I hope you really got a lot out of the presentation today. If you have any questions, my email is at the bottom of your sheet of paper, and I will also stick around at the end of this presentation to answer any questions you might have now. Thank you so much.